I thought that having you on for the cannabis segment would probably be one of the most, interesting guests, right? Because you've seen it all, right? You were one of the founders of Aurora, that's big conglomerate, publicly traded company, and you owned a significant amount of stock in that. And now you are small craft with BlackRock, cannabis, and I'm sure you've learned a tremendous amount through those experiences. And I think for this segment, I want to go through just everything, what you learned and what you guys could have done better and what you're doing now. Because I know I just talked to you earlier, and now you're driving success, you're profitable, and you're able to maintain a healthy business, have employees, and keep it going in a market that's highly regulated, very highly taxed, very difficult to do business in the cannabis. It's very difficult to do business in cannabis, period, with the testing, the regulation, and the tax. So I think we should just break it down from top to bottom. When you were how did Aurora, how did you guys get started? How much stock did you own? Like, talk about that story.
So we talked about this briefly. I'll spare you the details of how the whole company started from start to finish and how it blew up. But the kind of view from 10,000 feet is started as a medical play. Health Canada first announced that licenses were going to be issued for medical cannabis production, had an idea to design, build, and construct a 55,000 square foot facility. This is going to be a privately held company, and there's a relatively small group of tight investors and a handful of people involved in the startup. Once we got going, things really, really started picking up speed within the industry in terms of investment availability, just general sentiment and excitement. It started really blowing up. It was the type of thing you started seeing in mainstream media, and it was positive. It wasn't negative, which is really exciting. I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve compared to the US in terms of, the public really being on board with it, especially from a medical perspective.
Yeah, but it's more federal then, right?
Yeah, which helped us a lot.
So
because
you're able to get financing.
Yeah, there's no issues with banks. I mean, there still were some issues with banks. Any of the big banks that dealt with U.S. business, there was always that fear of, well, just because we're doing something that's legal in Canada, what does that look like in the U.S.? Because the U.S. is such a big influence on Canada. That's a bit of an understatement. Even crossing the border, it's like, well, I'm legal. I've got a federal license to do this. There's nothing. The RCMP, which is basically our FBI, has given me a security clearance, but I can't really say what I do at the border. We're actually advised not to get like the Nexus pass because it's such a deep dive and you have to disclose where you're working for and everything. So you're not trying to hide things, but you're still kind of staring at your shoes going through customs,
Yeah. How much stock did you own of Aurora?
So originally, when it was a privately held company, I was able to negotiate 20% of the company. And then very quickly, I'd say within the first year, like I say, when things started really ramping up and things started getting really, really exciting from like a market perspective, like a capital market perspective, which is not my background, to be clear. I'm a grower at heart. And also I used to run small businesses growing up. That's always working for myself, whether it was firewood delivery in the winter, concrete in the summer, home renovations, all very small, like kind of a one-man show, right? Working with other subcontractors. So I understood small business, and I mean small business, like, entrepreneurs,
What you're doing now.
Yeah, a little bit bigger than what I did when I was younger. I was used to more working by myself, or like I say, just relying on subcontractors and other sub-trades and whatnot. So at that point, I was pretty proud of myself to be able to negotiate that 20% of a privately held company. And it's also important to note I didn't have to put up any capital. It was bringing the expertise, sweat equity, and I'd already gone through the application process. So,
you were the one that kind of initiated the application.
Yeah,
so it was like your baby in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So I had previously held licenses through Health Canada under different licensing regimes, where it was more smaller. Probably similar to what I understand California was like, when you could either grow your own or grow for someone else, but it was a limited. My first license was for, I can't remember if it was 10 or 15 plants. So small.
Yeah.
Right? Like not much bigger than like a little tent, right?
Yeah.
So I was really happy with that, and especially when we looked at the production, I mean, 55,000 square feet, 1,000 lights for me, that was mind blowing, right? 20 lights at the time was a decent size grow. So to go from 1,000, it was exciting, it was ambitious, but it was also pretty terrifying, to be honest with you.
So you started off at 20% ownership of a privately held company. What does that look like when you're going through different transactions? How did you get diluted? How diluted did you get? And then how did they like come up with those conversations, right? Like is there a contract or what?
So this is where I started taking a bit more of a backseat and really trusting my other partners who had more business acumen. They were older, they had more experience, and they were more comfortable and familiar with the public markets. At that point, I'd never even held a stock. I don't think I ever had any sort of actual real investment, so to speak, right? No mutual funds or anything like that. So definitely trusted them, and suddenly the potential value of the company took off. Even though we didn't have a firm formal valuation, they explained to me, hey, that 20% that you negotiated, not a chance. When we go public, like, we're going to have to actually carve out a lot more shares for other people, some of these investment bankers, people that are helping us actually list for the RTO, and you're not keeping 20%. And I was like, okay, it makes sense, especially when the numbers are laid out. Scenario A, privately held company at 20%, you're worth X amount. 10% of a publicly held company or publicly traded company at 10%, it started really pulling away. And I got excited, so I went with it for sure. And had to sign off. It was obviously a lot of time spent in lawyers' offices signing papers that I probably should have read a little bit more. Not that anything bad happened, but.
So when you're in those situations, you're pretty much selling your stock for investment into the business to grow the business.
Yeah.
And everybody was.
Absolutely.
At a whatever agreed upon.
Everyone that held stock in the private company had to take a hit, but that's not really entirely truthful. We had a reduced percentage, but that's only because the pot grew so much.
Yeah, because the investment grew so much.
Absolutely. And also the valuation of the company grew so much. And at first, I had a tough time wrapping my head around it. But even when people that really knew the capital markets explained it and broke it down and said, like, here's some past examples, not so much with cannabis, but just with junior mining companies, like, here's what can actually happen. It's not that it sounded too good to be true, but it was out of my scope of expertise, and I'd never seen anything like it. But then again, at that time, I had never grown under 1,000 lights. I'd never run 1,000 light show. So this is all new to me, and it was, let's hold on and enjoy the ride.
What when you guys went public, how much? What was your percentage of ownership of Aurora at that time?
Went down to 10%.
Okay, went down to 10%. That's not too bad at all.
No, and it was, especially compared to where it went. And then you have to understand the trajectory was exponential in terms of, again, public sentiment, how well it was embraced, excitement in the capital markets, how quickly and easily you could issue another round of financing. So it got diluted very, very quickly. I don't even know. It'd be a drop in the bucket compared to what that initial share amount was. Total shares issued, 10% of that, compared to even what it looked like, say, 6 months, a year, or even 10 years after the fact. It's like I'm a fraction of a percent now, for sure, because so many shares were issued.
So you went into the public market, you owned 10% when you guys launched, and your shares continued to get diluted?
Yeah.
How did that work? Why is that?
Because every time, so as the stock price, as the share price, as the valuation keeps going up, the share price is going up. So you're looking at this going, well, we can issue more shares to make more money, if that makes sense, to raise more money.
Sell more shares.
Yeah. So there'd be another capital raise. So they'd say, hey, we're going to issue another, call it 100 million shares at the stock, for easy math, let's say the stock was at $2. We're going to issue it at $3. But now there's more shares. Does that make sense?
So it dilutes your 10%.
It does, but it's increasing the value because the stock, the valuation, the overall worth of the company keeps going up. You know what I mean? So because if I had, like, at one point when we had over $2 billion market cap, if I had 10% of that,
yeah,
I mean, I love you, but I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be, I don't know what I'd do with that kind of money.
Yeah.
But because it got diluted so much, there was nowhere near that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have to sign off on that being such a major shareholder?
Yeah.
So you had to sign off on, okay, hey, we're going to raise this much more money, and that money wouldn't go to you, it'd go into the business.
Yes.
For expanding the business,
Yeah.
which was increasing value.
Yes.
Right.
So in Canada, it's known as reporting insider. I'm sure the SEC has something similar to that.
Okay.
So basically there's everything, as much I didn't like it because I do like my privacy. I like to keep things kind of close to my chest. Everything was public. You know, how many shares I was issued. Anytime I sold shares, it'd be public, like available to see online. Yeah, how many shares were sold at how much, and I didn't love that, but it was what it was.
Yeah.
And so yeah, anytime I'd have to approve it as a reporting insider, and we all did. Everyone that was involved would someone involved. The team, it was now a team that was taking care of that end of business, would come up with a good proposal and say, hey, this is good for us, let's do this. And there was mergers and acquisitions. We were expanding at a rapid pace, as were any of the big companies at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about, you mean a max $2 billion market cap, and now it's valued at 300 millions, which is wild to see. I think, one of the biggest things in business that I think I've learned through the years is one, slow down and don't get big too quick, right? Because you got a lot of moving parts. Would you agree with that? What's your...
Absolutely. One of the biggest key takeaways from me was that style of business, that type of business, it's not for me. And nothing against people that are driven by it or motivated by it or do really well in it. I think there's a place for every type of small business or every type of business, minded person. That's just not what really appeals to me. And I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. It's sort of that growth at all costs. I really don't understand how when you can see a company, let's just say use Apple as an example, where if they miss expectations of growth, their stock takes a hit. I mean, I don't understand why we have to always be making and selling more of something. Is that company still not worth something if they're still selling billions of dollars worth of phones?
I guess it goes back to if you're not growing, you're dying, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. That to me should only apply in the form of cancer, I think. And you look at what happens in that regard, it's usually not good.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but even Canada, we barely missed entering a recession because we raised immigration levels so quickly just to offset. And I don't understand why that's so important. And don't get me wrong, I have zero issues with immigration. What I question is just manipulating numbers so that you don't hit, again, technical recession. What does that even mean? What does it matter? And I read another article about China, how they're having issues because people aren't getting married and having kids.
Yeah.
So their population's starting to decline. So what? You still have a lot of people in China that are probably, shouldn't that be better if there's less people out there?
Probably.
I don't know.
Consumption. But what do you think the biggest thing you learned is with that growth at Aurora and watching it just grow so rapidly, so fast, and they're just pumping so much? When you're looking at that growth, what were some of the biggest challenges through that situation?
So primarily through my lens, which was my main focus, the cultivation of things, I saw it so challenging to maintain product quality, because it just became a number, became a target. Production just became, and don't get me wrong, everyone still wanted to grow the best product out there. No one ever said, that's okay if it's shit, just pump it out the door. We all still had an expectation of quality, but that's where I found as a cultivator, it has started to become really challenging. As your rooms get bigger and your plant counts get bigger and your workforce gets bigger, I don't think it matters how much automation and how much tech you throw at it. You just can't grow that craft product on that sort of scale.
Yeah, 100%.
So I found that to be a big challenge again, and that's the lens that I really viewed it through, because that's my background, right? And yeah, it definitely was a challenge, and just starting to question, is this sustainable? And I feel at some point, I don't know who was really driving that growth, and not just for Aurora, but the entire industry. I felt like no one was really driving it. It just sort of took on a life of its own. And I think there's probably a lot of factors that played into it that kept pushing it over the brink. And even from uneducated investors looking to put in $100 and just buy $100 worth of stock. I mean, I remember having conversations with people and they'd be like, well, Aurora went from $2 to $10, let's say. So I bought this other company that's at 30 cents. So when they hit $3,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be rich. And like no idea of like what their metrics
Business
look like.
economics, who's running the show, who's in the helm, what's the team, what's the strategy, what's
No.
the market.
It was just,
I look at this price and expect to get the same outcome. Yeah, no, 100%. That's what do you think the biggest thing you learned as far as going private to public, the whole experience? What's your biggest takeaways?
I'm not, this is strictly speaking personally, I'm still not sold on the idea of a publicly traded company. I understand its value and how it can really help get access to capital for, things like rapid expansion. Again, that's just not the type of business I'm suited for. And that was a big thing. And that's more of like a personal thing. It ties into what I learned about business, but also gave me a chance to reflect on me and who I am and what my values are. And there's different ways to run a business. And it seems that what I've seen is in that large kind of publicly traded company space, it's almost that business at all costs, growth at all costs. And a lot of things can be justified that I personally have a tough time justifying because it's in the best interest of the shareholders.
A lot of waste.
Not only just a lot of waste, just like, do you ever find that sometimes people will just excuse being a shitty human because it's good business?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather,
for sure.
and it's just people wash their hands of it and just say, hey man, it's not personal, it's just business.
Yeah.
I mean, I that's a cop out. That's not how I want to live my life.
No, I think something that you said there is really important to touch on is knowing what drives you, but also knowing what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to not be, I remember when I was going through business and I was like, I should be better at finance. I should be better at accounting. I should be better at this. I should be better at that. Right. I think it's okay to not be good at something, but you got to be conscious of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are.
Absolutely.
I think that's the biggest thing in business, right? You're like, hey, I'm just not good at that, but get the right counsel or the right help or the right team or employee to help where you're weak, but take your time with that decision of picking the right person, right? Because since you're not good at it, might not know who the best person to pick is. So I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses, hiring for your weaknesses, and focusing on your strengths is really important in any kind of company.
I agree. But that wholeheartedly, I think you nailed it. That's, if you don't have the ability to take that ruthless, self-evaluation and brutal honesty with yourself, you're not fooling anyone. So there's nothing wrong with just realizing these are your talents. This is where you really excel and run with it. And sometimes there's certain things where they can be a little bit of a bloat, where it was hard for me to realize that I'm actually not that good when it comes to managing people. I really thought, just get along with people, try to be a decent person, more of that kind of just to connect with people and try to communicate clearly, be fair, be reasonable. And I realized that there's way more to managing people than I ever thought. There'd be times where I'd be kind of dumbfounded, where I didn't really know how to handle a situation and it was outside my expertise or any experience I've ever had. So I took some kind of executive coaching. I didn't have time to go back to school and get like a full MBA or anything like that, but I sought out someone who could, kind of coach me once a week for however many weeks. And I learned a lot. So, but I wouldn't have gone down that path and become a better manager to work with people had I not taken a look in the mirror and been like, it's too easy to brush off. Like, no, it's there. It's always someone else's issue. And so sometimes you need to realize that common denominator is you. You're actually the issue. I'm the issue. So how do I take ownership and how do I not keep repeating the same mistakes?
100%. It's okay to say, I don't know. And it's okay to say, I'm just not good at that, And I think you got to be comfortable with that in yourself. And another thing you just said, ownership. When you start looking at, when you're running a business or a company, when you take responsibility for everything that goes wrong, life is so much easier, in my opinion. It's easy for people to point blame, but if you're just like, look, whatever situation I put myself in, whatever situation that, you know, an employee did or something that happened, I think it's really important to say, like, get to the source of why, right? Was there not enough training? What did this happen? Communication's big in business, and take responsibility for it and be like, look, the fault of this guy not succeeding in his role or his position as an employee or a team member is my fault, right? What can we do to where it doesn't happen again? What processes do we need to do? What training programs? Do we need to make videos on how to use the system? Do we need to make videos on how to do X, Y, and Z so he can have a more successful role? Not the majority of time, I think that's what it is. Occasionally you'll get just somebody that's just not motivated or doesn't want to be there, and the head's not in the game. But I think the majority of the time, if they're there and they're working, or if there's a situation, I think it just comes down to training and communication is huge. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think it's much more beneficial to, instead of point the blame and just lay blame on everyone else and like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Take it a step back, like you say, take a step backward and be like, well, why did they make that mistake? Because often someone does actually make a mistake. They didn't follow an SOP correctly. They did too much of a default. They took off too much. They took too many shoots off, and now the plants are kind of fucked and your yield's going to suffer, right? So yes, it was their fault, so to speak, right? But were they properly trained? Were they trained well enough? Again, like you say, it ultimately falls back on you, right?
Yep.
And
with what you're doing now you're doing Black Rock Cannabis. Like, how big is it? Like, what do you have going on? Like, talk about that, because you're going from this huge publicly traded company now to craft cannabis, right?
So in that transition, I learned a lot. My ego got checked hard. I was humbled very quickly and realized I know I went into it a little too arrogant. So I thought that I had an idea about constant rotating strains. So small batch, really limited drops, and just constantly rotating. Just kind of bring in some diversity, right? I felt comfortable doing that because I was sitting on such a diverse genetic library. When it comes to seeds, I'm such a dork. I love collecting beans, and I thought I could just do that. Every crop, split the rooms into 3 different lots, and again, just drive demand through scarcity. And it made sense to me, right? The math checked out. What I didn't realize, I didn't have a good enough grasp on the distribution. So you can't just sell to a store. I mean, in some provinces you can, but that market's really, really competitive. Everywhere else, you have to pitch to a provincial, so like kind of like a state distribution board. And some of them are hard. Some of them, they've got like a lot of hoops you got to jump through. So it's even another added layer of bureaucracy and a lot more eyes, a lot more steps. You can only pitch like on product calls every so often. I think one province is only like maybe 3 or 4 times a year.
What do you can only call a customer 3-4 times a year? Is that what?
So in terms of product calls, so a province, like the province that's going to be doing the distribution, that board that will sell to all the retailers, they'll only have a product call. Like, so basically companies can pitch their new products sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a year.
Oh, wow. So it's really limiting.
Yeah. And the biggest flaw I made a lot of mistakes, a lot. I think I went from being really isolated and insulated from a lot of the decision making because Aurora was so big, literally thousands of people, like I think over 2,000 people at one point. I forget how many countries, 30, 40 countries all over the world. Like, we were massive, but there was so much support there that, like, again, I was so insulated. Like, everyone was so insulated that nothing really fell on my shoulders. So I think it gave me I know that it gave me a really distorted view of how things were. I definitely became arrogant, more in regards to how I approach business and what I thought I could do.
When you're starting Black Rock.
Yeah. Not necessarily as a person, but like in terms of what I thought I could do. Like, I was really motivated, really ambitious, and thought it was very positive. And then again, made a lot of critical mistakes. Really underestimated the importance of distribution. It's probably one of the biggest points I'm gonna drive home, like in our chat today, is if you're a cultivator, if you're a producer, if you have something that you want to get to market, understand that it doesn't care. The market doesn't care. The consumers don't care. No one cares how good your product is, how unique it is. They don't care unless you can actually get it to them. So if you don't have some sort of distribution lined up, and it's hard. And what I've seen in a general sense in Canada is there are really good growers and there's really good distributors. I don't know many that do both really well.
Now, you were kind of, I remember talking to you about it, doing a lot of different limited runs, running one genetic one time, putting it back in the bank, a lot of diversity, a lot of different SKUs, right? I think that's really big because it's very difficult to manage a lot of SKUs. And when I was talking to you, the one downfall that I did, was hearing as I was like, man, that's a lot of different SKUs to manage. It's a lot of different kind of cultivars. It's a lot of different kind of packaging. It's a lot of different kind of, Did you test that out, and how did it go? What happened, and what are you doing now?
So the test was live, went live full steam ahead, and ended up sitting on a lot of product that couldn't get moved, that had to be sold at a loss.
Why?
Because I was limited into where I could actually move that product. So because any of the other provinces that had larger consumer bases where there's more demand, there's more ability to sell larger volumes of product, they just weren't interested in small lots. They would say they'd be like, cool, you've got 10 pounds. I don't care. We need a minimum of 100. We will not order
of the same cultivar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because mine were so small and so limited, they thought because it's again, what I failed to realize and understand is it's just another layer of of a different type of government bureaucracy. And so there's people, and they're not invested. They're not passionate about the industry. They don't care. It's just a matter of, well, we need to list it, and that's more work on my end. And then I've got to make it available. And I'm not doing that for, however many cases. I need to justify my time to get this available to the retailers. And there's got to be at least, 100 cases or 1,000 cases or however many pallets. And I'm like, well, I don't have a pallet. But we're not entertaining this product. We're not entertaining this conversation. And then, so I thought I could even get around. So I tried getting around to work around with just a rotating SKU. So a rotating strain in one SKU. I saw it in the craft beer market, and especially in Alberta, the province that I'm from. Even though I can sell into other provinces, the craft beer market's really big. And I saw this rotating SKU, and I thought it didn't make sense to me. Why can't I do that? Just list a SKU and then it changes, right? And it's just all I have to do now is I'm just changing the label, and because I'm the packager, I'm the processor, that's just more work on my end. Don't worry about it. It's not any more work on your end. But then the potency numbers vary.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, look, yeah.
The product consistency in the product changes.
I kept running into all these walls. So one of the provinces that's easy to sell into because you can sell direct to retailers, I had to just to keep the lights on, and I got to a point where I wasn't comfortable or willing to keep putting any more personal financing into it. And forget about raising capital in cannabis. I don't know what it's like in the US right now. I'm assuming
you can't raise capital right now.
Forget it. I don't care how compelling your story is. And I feel for it. I mean, I feel for people out there. I feel like there could be people listening or watching us right now that have some sort of crazy innovation. They could have the product available that no one's ever seen, and they could literally change the face of the industry. But if they don't have the ability to get off the ground, I don't think they're going to. Capital is so hard to come by right now. So what I had to do was just make it attractive by price and sell directly to stores. And it was a lot more work, a lot more time, a lot more energy, but it was necessary to keep going. And I was learning a lot of lessons, learned a lot, and it was very humbling. And then just ended up sticking with one cultivar.
It sounds like your distributors didn't want to deal with a lot of SKUs as well.
Nope.
And when I started Lux, the vision for the company, at the time there was a lot of lighting brands. I remember walking MJ BizCon and I counted 80 lighting brands at MJ BizCon. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to create a lighting brand. There's so much competition. And then I really focused on the actual brand, right? And I was like, none of these guys are growers. I walked up to 80 lighting companies and none of them grew cannabis. Nobody had an experience. But when I was starting that, I wanted to focus on low SKU count, right? I wanted the customer to have an easy decision to make, and focus on high selling SKU counts. And don't overcomplicate it and keep it really simple. So that's why when we launched with two lights, Veg Light, which is the CMH 630, one of the, at the time, right, one of the best veg lights in the industry, CMH 630. It's perfect for veg. And then the flower light, which is the double-ended 1,000-watt HPS, right? That's two SKUs, and we had two SKUs on the bulbs. You got the double-ended HPS 1,000-watt, and then a controller. So what are we launching with? 5 SKUs, 6 SKUs. We launched Lux Lighting with 5 or 6 SKUs. But I had to learn that, right? Because I had owned and managed, 2 hydroponic stores. So I knew what it was like to manage 6,000 SKUs, all different kinds of brands, all different kinds of products. And it's extremely difficult to manage, and it's extremely expensive to manage. When I learned to hone in on the most important, SKUs, and you could really focus on doing one thing and keeping it really simple, not just for you, but for your customer base as well. Like they know you offer this and this. And if you look at Apple, right? Apple's a perfect example of this. Like if you go, they have very limited SKUs. They've got 2 iPads, they've got, 2 phones and a few very limited SKUs. And so do you think, is that similar to what you experienced in the cannabis, limiting your SKUs and making it easier for your distributors to manage and easier for you? Or is that different?
I think it's a little different. And I want to almost answer your question with a question. So what you're talking about managing SKUs for Lux, do you think I understand what you're saying, and with your experience that you gained from the hydroponics end of things, seeing when customers walked in and were like, "Hey, I'm outfitting with Grow. I need 10 of these." Like, do you think it depends on the product, like what you're trying to sell, not the SKU, but like, so I don't think people need a lot of options when they're choosing their lights. It's how many rooms are you setting up? You got your bedroom, you got your flower room. Okay. And at that point, it'd be more, I'm thinking about it as a cultivator, like, okay, well, what brands do you have and what's your price point? I know I'm going to go double-ended HPS for flower and I'm going to go for your veg light. So I don't think it would make sense to say as a retailer at a hydroponic store to have 100 options of each. What's the point? Like, you're looking at a menu. But I think in a dispensary, when it comes down to people switching up, not a lot of people, in my experience, aside from medical patients that really like to find a strain that works for them, for their specific ailment, they don't want that to go away. I find most people, even if I find something that they just love, and it doesn't matter whether it's, edibles are usually pretty consistent, but any sort of like vaping or inhaled cannabis, I find even if it's great and they love it, you always kind of build up a little bit of a tolerance and start to kind of stray away from it. And even if people are really loyal to a brand or a specific strain that's offered, it's always like, okay, you still have that. What else do you have that's new? Do you have anything else that's kind of crafty? Do you have something else that's citrusy?
The consumer wants to switch it up more.
So I think that your SKU count is important. I think when you're looking at what type of product you're selling. So I totally understand what you're saying about from like a equipment and perspective. I looked at it, I just because I've seen how people want to switch it up and you got to stay relevant. And I'd also seen how on scale, there's these waves where all of a sudden there's demand for product, you can't get enough of it, and then it will just drop off for cannabis, right? For cannabis products, specifically flower is what I'm talking about. And people are always sort of chasing it, and trying to that's actually one of the things that the people that are good at distribution are really good at managing that demand and anticipating
and keeping their pulse on the market
and anticipating forecasting out future demand so that they know, okay, well, it ramps up and then we're going to hit an inflection point where the provinces are going to demand. They're not ordering 1 pallet, they're ordering 10, right? But they also know that's going to level off and it's going to drop.
What are you doing now at BlackRock with your SKU count and your production as far as managing a balance where you're not doing too many different genetics, but also doing just the right amount?
So from a pure production point, in terms of commercial production, we're all trained between one of two cultivars. That's it. So that's at the nursery that I oversee. I've got my mother stock, and I've got 2 cultivars ready to go at any time, and we just alternate between the 2 of them. Or sometimes, depending on the distributor that we're working with, they will specify we want strain A over and over and over again. Sometimes we do a mix, but it's ultimately driven by the distributor, which has been great to work with. On the nursery end of things, I'm still always hunting. I'm doing my own breeding. I'm popping seeds. I'm always hunting. And so those are always kind of a back burner because you still always have to be looking out. And that's kind of the dance I'm doing right now, is realizing that these 2 cultivars, their demand is likely going to drop out at some point, probably sooner than I'd like. So how do I find something that's going to work? It's going to fit our model for production. There's not going to be a lot of like tweaking our systems or our SOPs to make sure that we get the yield and the quality we're looking for. And it's going to fit the market demand, right? So then you've got other factors and forces at play where it seems like there's a demand for more kind of fruity stuff right now. Whereas at one point, everyone wants gas or everyone wants that, so
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
And then how many different SKUs are you producing on the flower pre-rolls? Are you just doing flower or are you mixing it up?
So just flower, and right now just wholesale. So I completely got out of the packaging and distribution of things. I got out of it completely because I realized that was a huge weakness.
Okay. So you went from packaging flower to just selling elbows. And are you selling it under BlackRock brand, or how does that?
No, so it goes to another distributor, like another producer that they're free to do whatever they want with it.
Now so with that, I remember you calling me and asking me, hey, where can I buy Rockwell cheaper? Mm-hmm. Where can I get this cheaper? Like you went on this rampage, mm-hmm. right? Of just focusing on cost to produce. Like what was that experience like? How much did you save and how did you do it?
So I did a complete 180. And this is where I talked about a bit of that kind of humbling experience going from Aurora and starting BlackRock, where I had to really learn a lot of hard lessons. And I'm very grateful for them. I'm exceptionally grateful for what I learned. And I had the attitude of we're producing a premium luxury product. This is when I started BlackRock. Cost is no option to produce. So I'm not going to take any shortcuts. I'm not going to cheap out on any of my inputs. I'm going to make it the best we possibly can. And I'm not going to worry about trying to crank out every extra gram. If it's a lower yielding cultivar, I don't care if it really hits. And if it's got, really attractive qualities that I thought the market would want. So I wasn't worried about maximizing production, and I wasn't worried about minimizing costs. If I'm being honest, I almost think I kind of inverted a little bit, where I was leaning more towards more rare kind of exotic cultivars that weren't necessarily commercially viable, and I was sparing no expense at producing it. Learned really quickly that was not going to work at all. So again, did a complete 180 and realized, and I didn't like that because to me that just seemed to go against having a quality high-end brand, or even take the brand element out of the equation, even just having a high-end product. But then I realized, I did a little bit of looking into like really high-end brands, whether it's alcohol, watches, designer handbags. Louis Vuitton, as an example, they still minimize their price, their cost inputs. It's a high-quality product, but they're not just overpaying for their inputs. They're not overpaying for labor and whatnot, right? Just as an example. So that switch that I had to do was like, how do I drive my cost down? Because I had to. Because I realized that the market is set. Like the price that I'm getting per gram is not really going up or down too much. Like I can't squeeze it out anywhere else. You know what I mean? I can't raise my price of what I'm getting. So that number is not changing. The only way that I can essentially make more, keep more in my pocket, maintain some profitability, is to lower costs and increase production. So those are the only 2 variables I could play with. And so I had to start calling around, and I had to be motivated. I had to just look into all my sources and start to do the math where, what does that look like over the course of a year? And sometimes, I'd be like, okay, what's a $4,000 savings? And, that's not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But then I'd multiply that by 10 different areas. I'm like, well, that's 40 grand. You know what I mean? Then I'd do that another 5 times. I'm like, fuck, that's 200 grand right there. You know what I mean? Just by making small little changes without sacrificing quality. So it wouldn't be about choosing what I would perceive to be an inferior grow media. It would still be sticking within Grodan 4-inch cubes, right? Like I'd still stick within that and I'd still grow on slabs. But what supplier and
Where are you sourcing it
where am I
from?
sourcing it from? And does it make sense to buy larger quantities? So because, and this is where, small business owners can, with limited access to capital, can struggle because sure, it might make sense to buy 2 years worth of rock wool because you're going to save a ton on it. But do you have that upfront cash to actually buy it? Do you have the space to store it? Whereas if you're just doing crop to crop, walking into your local hydro store, you're paying top dollar. Right. So how do you find that out? Like, where does it make sense? Like, and it's a dance, and you just got to work through it and play through numbers and build some spreadsheets. And I became a lot more of a numbers guy out of necessity. And again, I learned a lot, and I've got a lot more respect for that now. Whereas I didn't before. I thought that actually went against building out or producing quality product. I thought you grow good cannabis, and it still maintains true. I still maintain 100% that you cultivate good cannabis in the grow room, not in front of a spreadsheet. But the business end, I've learned, is on one hand unfortunate that it can be separate, that there's a bit of a disconnect, because the plants don't care about the spreadsheet and the spreadsheet don't care about the plants, but you need them both.
Yeah.
To be successful.
Yeah, 100%.
So I took, again, because I've said it before, I'll say it again, because my passion is as a cultivator, I was always almost in defense of the plants. You know what I mean? I'd almost like, because I would stick my nose up at that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But I realized that I can't grow the plants if I'm not profitable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. You got to understand what your cost to produce is. So
I looked at it from every angle and just sharpened the pencil. And, it meant finding new suppliers sometimes. And sometimes that meant not continuing relationships with certain vendors that, quite frankly, I really liked the guy that I was dealing with. I really liked the company. But if, when you give an opportunity, you're not trying to play hardball, or you're not trying to put anyone out of business. But when you say, hey, just do the landscape of the industry, I've had to get some other quotes. Here's another one I got from a competitor. Like, are you willing to match it? And if they come back and say no, but thank you for the opportunity, that's all you can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you were doing that for months.
I had to.
I remember. You didn't have a choice.
And then also, I remember one of the things I saw people at Aurora do that I didn't understand was they were always looking to how do you squeeze out just a little bit more, another percentage here, another percentage there in terms of production, right? How do we shorten our flowering time? Can we shave a few days off here? And again, almost being in defense of the plants and trying to defend cultivating the best product possible. It would be like, no. If they need 10 weeks, let them go another 2 days. I don't care. But I saw that push about how do we shorten that a little bit? And how do we reduce our input costs? Can we save a feeding here and there? How many shots are you giving? And you're like, well, holy fuck. Like, really?
Going down to the shots. I mean, that's a little too much. Yeah, you can't do that.
But then on scale, when you've got literal facilities that at one time were over 1 million square feet, taking a smaller shot over the course of a year, it does add up. And so I didn't necessarily get that granular, but because I'm a smaller, that wouldn't matter,
Yeah, but that could also affect the quality and yield. It could affect a lot of things,
So again, there's that balance, right?
Yeah, you got to pay attention to your irrigation strategy and make sure you're not being wasteful. I see a lot of waste like that in the industry, but once you figure it out, you got to stick with it, in my opinion. But
yeah, and when you say you see a lot of waste in your experience?
A lot guys running off a lot of fertilizer when they don't need to be. Guys overfeeding and getting tremendous amount of runoff, which it's just you're flushing nutrients down the drain. You could run Proline out of 2EC if you wanted to, but a lot of guys have so much runoff that it needs to most of the time be run out of 3EC. If you stack the media, you'll save a lot of nutrients and a lot of cost. I don't know if that's a significant amount as far as finding a better supplier or less. I mean, I'm sure you'll get more benefit, in my opinion, when you're looking for a better supplier or lower cost on a lot of other items. What was your biggest savings that you saw?
So in literally any of my input costs, electricity provider was a big one. So in Alberta, you have to really take a good hard look at everything. So in Alberta, we have an unregulated market where different providers can offer different rates. I had no idea, and this again, these are hard lessons to learn. I had no idea how much of a difference. So if you just call up, so when we build a facility, you call like the normal, like, EPCOR, NMAX, whatever it is, just like the electricity provider that you just assume was a default provider, and they are the default provider. You just thought that was kind of the rate. I didn't really even question it. But then you find out there's different programs for different size business, and there's different rebate programs. And I reduced like our electricity input cost. I think it went from like 15 grand a month down to less than 4 grand.
Whoa.
So there's things like so there's some big ticket items like that where that was huge.
Yep.
That was big, right?
That's probably the biggest savings you had across all.
I do know there's programs available where if you are considered, if you hit a minimum threshold of how much power you're consuming, and this is probably different from state to state, for different jurisdictions have different rules and different programs, right? But I know there's this one where they kind of maintain almost a virtual power grid, where in times of peak demand, where if they're worried about blackouts or rolling brownouts or whatnot, they will contact people that they've signed on to this program. And if you can shed your load for a predetermined amount of time to free up that power onto the grid, and you just run off your backup generator, So if you think about it, okay, we got to do that for what, maybe 12 hours? It's not really that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking 12 days. We're talking 12. Then you can get significant. There's definitely different programs. So again, does solar make sense? Does this make sense? I don't know it in Alberta, it doesn't, but maybe different jurisdictions, it makes sense, like, to look into different source of power.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to get on the phone. You got to look at your numbers. You got to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really important.
Absolutely.
As far as like scheduling and workflow, like, have you been able to gain efficiencies and save a lot of cost on labor or on that?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest areas, and I feel a lot of small business owners, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you wear a lot of different hats. Sure, there might be a title on your email signature. I was going to say business card, but people don't have those anymore. So, you might have, your official title, but you do a lot more than just that. And I know I do. And it became a matter of sort of necessity where, let's just give one example. So regulatory affairs, maintaining the licensing. So there's monthly reporting requirements, maintaining good records. I looked at that, and do I like doing it? No. When I look at it, I'm like, it's really a couple hours out of my month. It's not that big of a deal when I really look at it. And I'm not that bad at it. I can actually just kind of bang it out pretty quick. So how on earth do I hire someone to do, I can't justify, part-time positions are hard to find good people. Most people, if they're, really solid at what they do, they're looking for some stability and they want a full-time position. So I can't pay someone a full-time salary for 2 hours a month. So then I started thinking about it. And if I hired, say, an office admin or someone who is really, really qualified and competent to do all these little pieces that I do every month, I'd have to pay them a small fortune because it's such a unique skill set. You know what I mean? Just to be good at this, be good at that. So being able to be diverse and to be able to take on different roles, I think, is really important up until a point, because there's a point where you need someone in that position, right? So as much as I can handle so much on my plate, realizing that the production facility, we need to hire people in specialized roles, if that makes sense. So just kind of finding that balance. And it's one of the hard things that I found too, from going from small business to Aurora back to small business again, is realizing, especially in the corporate world, you don't really get a full 8 hours out of people. You know what I mean? And that's just life. That's just office life. For me, when I'm used to, when I'm working, you know what I mean? Because, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, I'm not there for the hours. I'm there to get the job done. So if I know I can do something in a few hours and leave, that's my motivation, right? My time is important to me.
Do you think for you, you're doing a lot of labor yourself, right? And as you're doing that labor, you're learning what it takes, how much time it takes, what the effort is. Do you think that's important for you to actually do the work before you hire somebody to do it and manage them? Or
yeah, for a few reasons. First, the first thing comes to mind when you ask me that is that way you can actually properly train someone. You know what I mean? So if you actually understand what it takes to go through that process, steps 1 through 10 or whatever is involved, I think that makes you much better to be able to communicate what needs to be done. Right. Yeah. The second part is, especially if we're talking about sort of cultivation or actually any aspect of the business where there's any sort of efficiency, the more time that I spent with the plants, I started really learning like just minor tweaks. Like as I started to really dial in those strains, it's paid off in dividend. It's paid off huge because we're getting so much more production out, and just again, little things. And you can't expect employees who are not as invested. In all fairness, most people that show up to earn a paycheck, that's really what they're looking to do. They want to exchange their time to do a job and earn a paycheck. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if they're not invested in really finding, and don't get me wrong, some people are fantastic employees and they go that extra mile and they have that eye for detail and they'll report back to me like, hey,
those are leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really important to touch on is to, spend time doing the actual task to have a better understanding to understand, the amount of work and time it takes to do the process, and also not to have over expectations on your team, right? Because if you haven't done the work yourself and you don't understand what it takes, you as a leader could be like have crazy expectations that aren't achievable to the team.
Mm-hmm.
And you're throwing all this on your team, expecting them to get it done or, have this outcome in time. And you haven't done it yourself. How do you know, right, what's enough time or what's enough bandwidth to get that process or situation done? And it could put a lot of stress on your team, I think. Having those high expectations without understanding the process or the labor that it takes, right?
Without a doubt.
When you be honest with this one. So
okay.
when you started BlackRock, how much market research did you do on numbers, taxes, compliance, labor cost, overall expense before you started it?
Not nearly enough.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, not nearly enough.
I agree with that. We seem to not do that, right?
No, I think because you're looking through it from rose-colored glass, like through rose-colored glasses, and there's something really sexy and fun about a startup. Especially if you're the type of person, which I know you to be, where you get an idea. Who knows where it comes from, but these ideas start forming in your head, and that act of creating,
it's empowering.
It is, and it's a form of expression. It's all kind of a form of art, no matter what you look at. Whether you're a musician, a painter, a sculptor, a business owner, when you take that idea that isn't real, it's not tangible, and you start to make it real. Like it's really, like you say, it's very empowering. For me, it's a really important way for me to express, I guess, essentially who I am, right? So I get really excited about that, and it's more the vision, it's more the look and the feel, and those details will work themselves out. And I would always do some kind of back of the napkin numbers. I'm like, yeah, they'll work out.
Yeah, you're really optimistic with it because you're being emotional about the decision.
Yeah. So this simple, easy piece of advice that everyone should take is it's going to take far longer than you anticipate, and it's going to cost way more. I don't know anyone who started a business that was like, oh, you know what? Actually, we wrapped up 3 months ahead of schedule, and it was like 50% what we budgeted. I've never heard that ever. It's always like, oh, I thought you were supposed to be open, or what happened? Weren't you supposed to be licensed by now? Or, the rent of this, and whether it's supply chain issues or labor issues or government issues, there's always issues, like no matter what. So like and for people that might be listening or watching that have actually done the math and they're like, no, I'm good. I've sat down, me and my team, we've sat down and we've run the analysis and we've got projections and we got our shit dialed. Like we're good. No, you're not. Like at a minimum, add 10%. And people, I've given this advice to people and they're like, yeah, no, we've already got that 10%. I'm like, add another 10. I don't even add another 10 of that. I'm like, nah, that's a little, but wouldn't you rather have that available to you and then that's sitting there as a buffer for your operations, which are now an unknown as well? Like you can't be cautious. I don't want to scare people, but you can't be cautious enough.
Yeah, I think with that feeling of creating something, that empowerment, and you're working through the numbers, sometimes you could be overly optimistic because you want this to happen, right? You want to do this, right? So you're not taking the time to possibly pay attention to the whole overarching market or situation that the market is in. And it's not just price per pound or operational cost. You've really got to look at the government, the local ordinance, batch size on testing is a big one. How much is the testing, right? What's the tax? How's the tax structure? What's the distribution model? Who's your competitors? Like, what is the distribution landscape as far as, are your distributors competing with you? Are you the last man on the totem pole? There's so many variables other than just a pro forma that you put together that you really need to look at when it comes to market. What are some things that you looked at before starting BlackRock, and what are some things that you really kicked you in the ass, right?
So the one smart move I made was I wanted when I was looking at the build out costs, I wanted to know kind of exactly what things are going to be like, and I wanted to allocate enough funds and resources, and I wanted to be looking at it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I want to have it all in place and structured and ready to go. I realized that wasn't taking shape quite the way I was hoping for. As I started digging into it more and more and more in terms of actual like quotes build out costs, I realized that sometimes to get to one point, you have to hit one milestone before you can get to the next. So I knew that it was going to be kind of an organic process that had to unfold on its own. And I'm glad that I just went for it, because by some stroke of luck, we seem to be a month or two ahead of some crazy price increases. So when we started the build out, like steel went crazy, like when we get quotes, people would be like, oh man, good thing you put in your deposit, and we did, because we've just gone up, 30%. So looking back, like we saved a ton on the build out cost. It was a lot. So on one hand, it really paid off, but that was almost right time, right place type thing, if that makes sense. The other thing was, one thing I learned also was, as much as you can do your homework ahead of time, and I didn't do enough of it, but even though I had a good grasp of things when the project started, I realized quickly, and I'm still learning, just how complex it can be to actually try to take a look at everything. Like, you can take a look at the macro fairly easy and get a good understanding of kind of the pieces that are involved. But when you really start diving into the minutia of everything, it's really, really complex. There's a lot to understand. And what further complicates it is that it's dynamic. It's not static. So it's not like one thing. It's not one snapshot.
Especially in this industry, it's very dynamic.
Absolutely. So you've got price compression, you got all these trends, you got all these things that are happening. And it always makes sense in hindsight, right? I love it when people talk about their analysis of the industry, of any industry. All these experts and people that are smarter than us always have the answers, but they're looking back. They're explaining what happened. And a lot of people, when they try to forecast something looking out, if they're wrong on it, like, oh yeah, well there's unexplained headwinds, or there was some curveballs that we didn't see, we didn't anticipate, and there's no way we could have anticipated that.
Yeah.
No one has a crystal ball.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's really important to keep emotions out of your decisions, and make sure you're not just looking at the numbers, but you're looking at the market, the relationships, the situation. And just because everybody's doing it and it seems like a great idea, like, take your time, right?
Well, and especially, I almost really want to speak directly to anyone who has a strong cultivation background, who's going, no, but I have a great product. All the feedback I'm getting, people love my cannabis. We did a trade show where we were allowed to provide samples, which was a new thing. And everyone was floored by it. The feedback we got was overwhelming. People were like, damn, this is good. This is really good. People are excited. We're giving away clones. We're giving, and people were stoked. People loved the idea of it. They loved the brand. They loved everything about it. It didn't matter.
You still got to get it to the market.
Yeah.
You still got to do the distribution. You got to get it visible. You've got to get the customer walking in asking for it. It's just because you get some good feedback at a trade show doesn't mean it's going to pop. 100%.
No, because I didn't have a path to market. I didn't have a way to get on shelves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that
the distribution network. And that goes back to the market. What are the relationships in the market?
Mm-hmm.
Are your distributors producing themselves? Because if they're producing themselves and that's the person buying your product, then you're last on the totem pole.
And that's actually a good point as well, too. What made me think about that was when you're saying if the person you're selling to is also a producer. We're seeing a lot more of that, and I think it's smart because one of the things that we saw a lot, one of the reasons why there's a lot of cultivation facilities that have gone under and now they're available for pennies on the dollar, were people that did really well at one size. And it doesn't matter if it was 5,000 square feet or even 100,000 square feet. They did well, and all of a sudden the demand was there and they were selling out. And then I would really, really strongly advise people, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this, to not panic and not grow. Like, don't freak out when, like, that's a good problem to have. If you're running out of product because you're selling everything you're producing, that doesn't mean you need to expand tomorrow. And I've seen so much panic ensue where people are like, well, we need to get another facility. And you don't realize that even by doubling it, it's not linear. It's not like by doubling your production, you're doubling your expenses or doubling your headaches. I think it's exponential. Even if costs are relatively, doubled, the amount of headache, the amount of stress, the amount of how hard it is to oversee another facility, don't worry about it. And the reason I bring that up is because we're seeing more of that where producers are going, oh, hey, I'm out. I'm selling out every month. How do I fill my SKUs? Because I have the demand, I can sell more, but that doesn't mean they should grow more. So they can source from other
100%.
cultivators. So we're seeing a lot more kind of really cool alliances like that. Whereas previously when things were going through the roof, it would just be a straight like merger or acquisition. Yeah. We want your production. We're just gonna take you.
Yeah, buy you. And now it's just more partnerships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing on that, maybe if you're a small facility and your cost to produce is X, and you have this belief that if you scale bigger, that your cost to produce will decrease. I realize it doesn't. It doesn't decrease.
No.
Your cost to produce stays the same, and you're just growing more product. You think on paper, oh, it makes sense. Like, if I scale, my cost to produce will go down. It doesn't go down.
In some regards, it might.
It might.
There's some economies of scale.
But it doesn't always.
You can track that. There's certain metrics that you can track where, yeah, it does make sense on paper, but it's all the stuff that you forget about. It's how complex and how dynamic those pieces of the puzzle are, that where you can't foresee all the additional things that you're going to have to run into to get that extra size and scope.
Yeah, 100%.
And, one of the things, like, as we're talking about this, the thought just came to me is once you get in it. So, we talked briefly about that sort of initial startup phase where, you're in the active creation and you're excited and you're passionate about it. Try not to go with emotion, not trying to lead with emotion too much. Now we're talking about sort of that middle process where, should you be fortunate enough to actually get to the point where now you're licensed, you're cultivating, you're producing, getting product out the door. Now you're faced with the decision of, well, hey, should we expand? Should we not? It all of a sudden can happen very quickly. And next thing you know, you look back and you're like, man, it's been 5 years since I started this. That's insane. 5 years, like, what happened? I blinked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you start to lose sight and lose focus. And sometimes you don't even really know what you're doing anymore. And I missed it at the beginning, and I've missed at other points. So I'm really trying to take a break, take a breather, and be like, what am I doing? Like, what is my purpose?
What's the overall strategy?
Why am I doing this? What's my goal, right? And I'm not talking about some cheesy bullshit, corporate mission statement where it's like, blah, 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 produce the global leader and blah, blah, blah. No, like, do some soul searching. Like, really, like, think, like, what am I doing this for? Like, okay. And so most people, it's like, well, I'm trying to provide for my family, or I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. If you're the type of person where it is growth at all costs, and you're like, I want to grow this business and I want to lower my costs and I want to snatch up, I'm going to like go in and drop the price, and I'm going to grab market share, and it's going to be a race to the bottom, and I'm going to grab more people as they go under, and you're going to be really predatory. Cool, go for it. If that's what really gets you out of bed in the morning, right? Or what's wrong with having just a small company? I've had people say, "Oh, so good, that's awesome, that things are going well." Like, what does it look like now? Are you expanding? Is another facility? It's like, no, I'm good. I've seen that. I've seen what happens when you just keep going and grow at all costs. And that's not where I'm at. So really take a look at it. And when you come up with it, make sure it's true, make sure it's authentic. And are you actually doing it every day? So really, and I haven't actually distilled it down into, a nice polished phrase or motto or mission statement or anything, but I actually kind of look like, what do I want my day to look like? You know what I mean? Like my average, Monday to Friday, like what does that look like? What do I have time for? The people that I work with, what are their lives like? And I want it to be, and they've done a great job. Like the facility I run, it's just me, I'm solo there, but the production facility, they've done such a great job, and it's like a little family. And the whole team, I think I touched upon this before, they move through all the tasks together. So there's not a lot of division where it's like, well, that's the trim team, or that's the prop team, or that's they all do it together, which I think is really cool. And it gives them a break, you know what I mean? So when they get excited that it's a default day, they're like, yeah, cool, shoot selection, they're all happy. But then they collectively kind of like, oh, shit, we gotta go back to trim now. And,
Yeah.
they
They're
say,
all in it together.
yeah. And I think that's important. And, and we live by what we say, like where I say, no, family's important. So if someone needs to take time off because their kid's sick, I make sure that like everyone, like it's actually accepted and encouraged and supported. It's not like, oh yeah, here at BlackRock, it's family first. And then they're like, hey, we noticed you took another sick day. What's going on? Like, do you know what I mean? You have
I've always ran my businesses that way. I've always ran there's nothing more that bothers me when I talk to somebody, oh, my boss won't let me go on vacation with my family or whatever because I have to work. I've anybody that's ever called me and said, hey, I want to go see my family in India and I'm leaving for 2 weeks. They're great. They're a great team member. They do what they say they're going to do. They get their tasks done. Let them go see their family for 2 weeks. Like who am I to say like, no, you can't go. Like, right. Every single business that I've ever done, I've had that they call me, hey, I'd like to do that. Go ahead. No problem. Not even not even a second guess. Right. It's such a terrible culture when you breed that into your team.
Well, and I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this. Based on your experience and like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a shift where for a while there, and I don't know, there was definitely a big shift around the pandemic, but there's almost this badge of honor in a lot of companies where you're like, well, that's Bob. Bob hasn't taken a sick day ever, and like Bob's the guy who comes in with the flu and is like, he'll be like in a boardroom meeting and like run to the bathroom, puke and come back. And like, and everyone's like, good job, Bob. Like, we need to be more like Bob. Whereas I think like now it's like, hey, then it actually kind of went too far where it's like, what, you get the sniffles, get out of here. Take 2 weeks off. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but not just health and wellness, but just in general that I think we're seeing more and more people that are realizing, and maybe it's gone actually too far to one extreme with younger generations where they are truly living to work, not work to live, and maybe it's gone too far in one extreme where, I hear stories of people like right out of school are kind of demanding like 5 weeks paid vacation. You're like, well, hold on, like this is an entry level position, like, no, like you can work towards that and you'll get there. You're still gonna get vacation, don't worry, but like you gotta kind of work there a little bit. Like somewhere in the middle, there's
a balance to it.
Yeah, but I feel like we're moving away from that, and I'm happy about it. I don't know if it's across all industries or like, what are your thoughts? Like, are you seeing a bit more of that shift where where businesses, and not just yours, but just in general, they're not trying to grind every last bit they can of their employees, and I feel like
I think it depends on the business, and it also depends on the person, and it also depends on leadership. I think leadership sets the tone. If you have leadership that is just like, hey, we're here to just do this task and we're working, but if you have leadership that's like, we're here to win and this is a game and it's not just working, but it's like, we want to win, as a business, as people, we want to be successful. It just depends on the culture that you breed within the organization. And I don't think one's negative or positive. It just depends on where people want to be. I've done both, and business is a game for me. It's fun. I'm like ADHD and all kinds of stuff. So I've got to stay busy, right? I got to stay busy, and business keeps me busy. And I really enjoy driving success for other people. But that also drives success for yourself, right? So it's with everything we've done, even Athena, our team, we focus on driving success for other people. And we do it with our SOPs, we do it with our products, we do it with ISO 9001, like quality control, we do it with videos, guidance, these podcasts right here. Like, what are we doing right now? Right? We are talking about, we're having humility. We're saying, hey, I made mistakes. This is what not to do. This is how we did it. And this is what you can do better. And I think it's a lot of fun, right? To take, your team that you're working with and watch them develop, not just financially, but mentally, physically, emotionally, learn about new things. We do a lot of training, right? We hire growers, right? Guys that have run, either 20, 50, maybe sometimes 1,000 lights, and they came from the trap, right? These guys haven't run calendars. They don't have calendars, right? They're not on Google Meet. They don't know how to run like an efficient email or a CRM or, a structured kind of lifestyle, right? Me either. I came from the trap too. So I think, the growth that I've had with managing a calendar and compliance and tax and accounting and just a structure, I think, for the team, I've seen a lot of guys that were very unorganized and kind of all over the place come into Athena and really get structured, but that structure rolls over into their personal life. And you're seeing success, not just at work, but you're seeing success outside of work, right? It's contagious, right? If you're like, hey, a lot of these guys are, investing into real estate, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they're getting it from the people they're interacting with, the people they're around. And I'm seeing a lot of individuals grow, which is cool. I have no idea why I went on that tangent, but
no, I think it's a really important thing to mention, because one of the things that you touched upon at the start of that was that for you, business, you view it as a game. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners would agree with you. And what's cool about that is it's a game that you set the rules to. So that's one of the things that was really important for me, always has been, is it's actually it's one of my biggest strengths, but it's also one of my biggest weaknesses, is I have a real issue with people telling me what to do. So when someone's like, 801, Chris.
I hate that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
or
horrible.
Trying to justify like, hey, I was going to, I worked late last night, but I'm going to take off early to go see my daughters, whatever. And they're like, no, like I need to be able to manage my own schedule 100%, because no one's going to work me harder than me. Right. And I'm fine with that, but I like setting the rules. And for some people, they might go to that extreme where it's like, for them to, like you say, to win, and not even a negative context, but that might be at the cost of everything else. Sometimes their personal health, their mental health, if they have a family, their families, right? Because for them, just building and growing a business and then just going to like, thousands to millions to billions to trillions, whatever, like that's their goal, right? But there's only so much time in a day. You know what I mean? For me, that's kind of like when you talk about the game, the rules. For me, it's like the rules of the game I want to play. Like how many hours do I have in a day? How do I want to divvy up that day? And what I think that's interesting is for you, it's not just about, you're not only putting all you've got only into like the business bucket. Like that's not, you know what I mean? It's, you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, you take care of your health. And that there's that trickle down effect, right? It's kind of like learning by osmosis, or just people, the overall vibe and just the feel where it's like, well, if you're doing it, it does rub off on other people. You know what I mean? That is
100%.
good leadership. So I think there's no surprise that Athena is doing well the way that it is, because it is a trickle down effect, right?
Yeah.
And that's where, in business, when I talk about authenticity and ownership and leadership, that's where you can't get away from it. In my previous experience, it was fast paced. It was frenzied. it was aggressive at times, and it's not my style. There's so many different ways of running a business, right? But what we found, it was this very corporate dog eat dog, you know what I mean? Like, if you got to step on someone to get up that corporate ladder, it doesn't matter. Like, it was like very
Yeah.
fierce competitive, right? And that works, you know what I mean? But it's not the type that's not what I want. That's not the culture I want to drive, right? Again, I'm not claiming there's a better word. It's just difference. And there's a place for everyone, right? And there's a place for every different type of business, but that's not how I want to structure mine.
Yeah, 100%. It's really important to stay conscious that leadership, it starts from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes into so many different things, You're a role model, right? And there's a lot of things that you might have done as a kid or acted or whatever, but when you're in a leadership role, you're setting the tone for your team of what's okay and what's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about leading by example, right? And you got to be really conscious of that when you're out at a trade show or an event. How are you interacting with customers? How are you interacting with your team? Are you going to the club at night, right? Like, what tone what example are you setting for your team? Like, because it starts from the top down, not only from the work ethic and energy and guidance and organization, but as like ethics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who you are and setting that example. So I think for all leaders, right? And for me especially, it's really important to stay conscious of that. Like,
You can't fake that.
you cannot fake that. Yeah.
If your actions and words and how you conduct yourself isn't in alignment with what you say you're doing, you know what I mean? If you're like, you can try to bullshit everyone as much as you want. You're like, no, this is how things are at Athena, but if you don't walk the walk,
100%.
then people see right through it and they're like,
BS.
it doesn't matter what the official company motto is, right?
Yeah. And it's big. And I think for me, like, I love my team. Like, I really love my team. Every business that I've done, I got a lot of love from my team. And I used to run business like so much love for my team that I would run it like a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, this is our family, right? But I pivoted that a few years ago and I started going more towards it's a team, because it's hard when you have so much love for your team to be a team, because you got to make some hard decisions once in a while, because it's not a family, right? Mm-hmm. There is a balance between family and team when you're building a group of people. And I think it's really important to be conscious that you're a team.
I agree. That was a big lesson that I learned. Remember earlier how I was touching upon when I did kind of a radical, honest self-assessment, I realized how poor of a manager I was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was a jerk, or I wasn't, considerate or kind. It was actually, it was too much of that way, where all of a sudden actually trying to, if there was any sort of conflict resolution or anything, decisions that need to be made, it was too much of a friend, too much of a family. And that doesn't mean, as a manager, as a leader, that you have to be a dick. You know what I mean? You can still be kind, compassionate, empathetic, but sometimes it's how you go about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you can speak to members of your team different than you can members of your family or friends, right? So there's but there's still nothing but love and respect there. It's just there's a different tone, there's a different approach. And that was really important for me to learn that distinction.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting being in leadership, whether you're a manager of 5 people, 3 people, 100 people, whatever it is. You're kind of like, you got the psychology aspect of it where you got to understand what drives your team, because different things drive different people, right? Some people might be driven by finance. Some people might be driven by recognition. Some people might be driven by security, whatever. And understanding what drives your team will help you adjust on how to pivot to focus on what drives them. And I think that's really big to understand. Also, everybody has a need to feel important. And I think you learn a lot about people when you understand what makes them feel important. Like it's a different kind of love language for each individual. And as leadership and leading a team, you've got to be really conscious and understand the psychology behind your team, because everybody's so different, right? So you got to always pivot and change and understand and communicate and ask questions, right? I think, questions, I see a lot of leaders telling people what to do, right? You do this, do that, do this. But if you say, hey, what do you think we should do? Like, how do you think we should handle this situation? What's the best process? What's the best flow? What's your thoughts? Like, do you have any ideas? And take them in and then give feedback and then communicate it with each individual person, depending on the situation, is extremely powerful. It's big because your team feels engaged and they're making a decision on where we're going, what are we doing, and it makes them feel part of the decision making. But also, you can't be everything. You can't be everywhere at once, right? Like the people down on the floor or doing a certain task know it better than you do. Like they do it every day. So getting their feedback and asking questions and getting their guidance to help you as leadership to make a decision is really, really important. I think it's really vital.
I agree. One thing that a question came to mind. So I think it's really, really powerful and really something you should be commended for by having that ability to pay attention to each employee or each team member as an individual and find the best way to engage with them and recognize that they're different. So, even in a very broad sense of like an introvert versus an extrovert, right? Two general kind of personality types. There's a different way that you kind of engage and communicate with both of them. So good on you for finding, even going more and more down that route of finding out what makes everyone individual and best way to work with them. But I'm curious, in your experience, what are some like just key fundamentals that were like, regardless of your personality type, what drives them, what motivates them, like at our essence, at our core, like what are some like things, and I've got a couple ideas that are almost universal, you know what I mean? So yes, everyone expresses them differently and responds differently, but at the end of the day, like what are some key, what are we all kind of looking for? What do we share in common where regardless of how?
I think number one is respect, right? And that comes with communication. I think everybody wants to be respected.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that would be key. I want everybody that's on the team to want to come to work every day. Like how would, I understand how that feels to have to go to work, right? But it's a completely different feeling to want to go into work. And you're 10x productive when you want to be there and you enjoy the people that you're around with no politics, and you're respected and your words have value, and you're bringing something to the team, because it's all just a collective, community mind all going towards one goal, right? We're all in it together. So I think respect would probably be the biggest one for me.
I agree. It's kind of like two sides of the same coin. For me, it was basically to be seen and to be heard, which that's essentially being respected. Right? Is there's no real better feeling. It's just like when that they're actually looking at you and they actually see you for who you are, where you're at the moment, and that when you say something that they actually heard you. Something worse than like, when someone's kind of like looking at you, they're kind of looking past, like, for sure. Yeah. No, I hear it.
Respected.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. You're doing a good job. And you're like,
yeah.
Oh, you didn't hear me at all. Like, you feel dismissed, and yeah.
And look, there's not time. Nobody's perfect, right? As leadership, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to be unconscious because you've got 1,000 things going on, a group of emails, meetings packed, but it is important to take a step back and take your time with individuals and be conscious of it. It's really big. So I saw that your questions came by, and these are from ChatGPT for sure.
What do you mean?
Come on. So
I did that on purpose, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah.
Why? What made you do this on purpose?
Because we were chatting about
ChatGPT,
and how much of a useful tool it is, right?
It's amazing. Like there's there's so much you can tap with it, right? So how are you using ChatGPT in your business now, and what are you like? How do you use it on a personal level, and how do you use it in business?
So business, hands down, anyone who's involved in any sort of like regulatory affair, in terms of dealing with applications and basically government, any level of government bureaucracy, I don't think there's a better tool out there than ChatGPT, because what I've seen, keep in mind, I went into this, I forget, 20 some years ago when I started getting my first, no, not 20, 15, 16 years ago when I first started getting my first licensing, looking at these application forms, not having a clue. I don't know what they're looking for. And I had no experience in like in-depth government kind of forms and regulatory affairs. I had no idea. So I just dumbed it down, and instead of like trying to like look at it as like an essay or like a school assignment, you know what I mean? I'm like, what are they looking for? And I literally would just go to the regulations and just like, if it would say like section whatever, a licensed producer must ensure that the facility is constructed in a way to prevent unauthorized access. I would literally just copy and paste that and put, instead of must, I'd put, as a licensed producer applicant, I shall ensure. Like that's literally all it is. Like, and I learned, and I've had this feedback from inspectors and auditors, that they literally just have a checklist. Like, does it meet? And they're not screening for content. They don't really care how nicely it's worded or what you're going to do. They just need to know, do you understand this specific part of the regulation, and are you going to adhere to it? All they care about is compliance. Are you going to be a pain in our ass, or are you going to be a good, obedient, compliant license holder? That's it. That's all they care about. So it's actually very cold and impersonal. Well, guess what? So is AI. Very cold and impersonal, despite the tone they try to take on, right? Which kills me, how you can play with it and make it do all sorts of weird stuff. But that is the best thing. So in terms of getting like an audit response, and I'm fairly confident none of the inspectors and auditors I deal with in Canada are going to be watching this. So, and if they are, I'm screwed. So whatever. But anyways, I will literally just copy and paste. If I get an inspection report, I'll just copy and paste and be like, write a response. You know what I mean? Like, because it's not, there's no threat to the business. There's no threat to the safety or security of the company. There's no threat to the safety or security of the product. This is literally just a regulatory formality that I used to have to sit down and just copy and paste, write line by line, and, chew up 2, 3, 4 hours of my day. Now it's like, what, 3 minutes?
Seconds, yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. Insane. And when I first started playing around with it, I'd have to really fine tune it and reread things. I'm like, well, that didn't make sense. Sometimes things would be worded wrong.
But now it's spot on.
It's insane.
It's spot on right now.
It's insane.
Yeah, it got better and better. Do you do the paid $20 a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
It's the best $20 I've ever.
Have you ever downloaded a spreadsheet in there? You pulled an attachment?
Yeah.
So how do you use it for spreadsheets and figuring out calculations and stuff like that?
What is really interesting to me, and what I found, the way that computers, I've admired and liked technology, but it's never really been very intuitive. Sometimes I don't really know what Google or the program is, like how I communicate to the computer what I'm asking for. What I love about ChatGPT is I can just talk to it the same way I'm talking to you. And it's like, okay, I got you.
Yeah, use it as like a mentor.
Well, or even like, so if I don't know how to basically say like some people would argue, if you're really good at Excel, if you know how to use Excel, you can do amazing things with those spreadsheets. I don't understand Excel, so I'm not very good at it. So I fumble my way through it. But what I can do is I can basically plug in a spreadsheet and say, hey, I need you to do this. Or like fairly complex problem solving that I used to be able to figure out no problem. But if I'm like, okay, I've got 2 cultivars, and one is a 9-week, one is a 10-week. Our dry room can only handle 1 crop at a time. I want to schedule this one this day, yada, yada, yada. I can throw in a ton of information, and you see the little bloop, bloop, and it'll just spit it out.
Your
I look
schedule.
At it. Yeah. I'm like, cool, do me a favor, put that in a table that I can export. Great, here you go. It's done. Like it's pretty impressive for sure.
Yeah, it's insane. I'm dyslexic, so I have a hard time reading comprehension.
Okay.
Right? So I have a hard time understanding what I read. So I have to take my time with reading, and then I grasp it. So contracts are a huge pain in the ass for me, right? So when I am looking at a lease or a contract, I'll drag the contract into ChatGPT and in a PDF or CSV, and then to say, what is the terms of this?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Break down the terms of this contract, and it'll just break it all down. Or I could just ask it a question on a lease. What's the what's the lease terms of this lease, and what are the, renewals and increases per month or whatever, and it'll break it all out of the lease within seconds. I'm just like, dude, this is
within seconds. And then on the
amazing.
flip side, if you need to generate a contract or an agreement with someone, you know what I mean? And what I love is it's so specific here. If you're like, hey, I want you to draft, and they used to have to, software's gotten a lot better where instead of having to go to a lawyer all the time, or like a company like mine, who we don't have a dedicated HR department. So if I wanted to hire someone, I used to have to go to, I can't remember the name of the company, but it's basically like a website that would generate legal forms, and you kind of fill in each thing. So it's like, what province are you in? Alberta. What is it, a full-time, part-time position? So you kind of enter in all the details, which might take me, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then it'd spit out like an employment agreement that then I would like send to someone. Now, and I can just do like the talk to text function. I'm like, hey, I'm looking to hire person's name on this date in the province of Alberta. Starting wage is this much per hour. Generate an employment agreement. Done. There you go.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, and actually regulations, anything that when you look at it, I think it's so efficient with. I really would strongly, just on a personal level, really advise people not to use it for personal matters in terms of like, I don't know, if you got an email from your aunt or something like that, don't be like, hey, generate a response.
Yeah,
like,
I think using it for ideas.
Yes.
Ideas, like, but make it be your own words.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it'll help give you some ideas, I think, for sure.
And yeah. And actually, even on work matters, but stuff that's a bit more personal, there's times where like I can tell my own emotion, my own bias is in there, and I feel a certain way, and I want to be like, and I miss points, right? So I'm like, hey, break this down. Like, I'm really pissed off right now in the situation. And you can speak this way to her, right? Like, but what do you think about this? And it's like, well, it sounds like this person's trying to communicate this and this, and you're like, it's almost like having a mediator right there. You know what I mean?
Well, and a mentor, a mediator, giving you advice, everything. I'm starting to use it more and more. I was thinking about taking like some kind of chat GPT class or some kind of AI class because I feel like I'm just using it surface level, right? There's so much more you can do with it if you really get into it, I think. So
I don't want, again, this is, there's probably so many other podcasts that are doing a much better job talking about AI.
100%.
But Matt, we are going to, I just want to say that I think we're going to see the craziest shit in the next month, 2 months, 12 months. Like, it's accelerating so quickly. I don't think we have any idea what we're in store for. Because we both touched upon, like, first working with ChatGPT, it was all right. It was good. Yeah. It was pretty cool, but it's absolutely flawless now.
Yeah. So when, you didn't come from money, right? Your parents didn't have money.
We were good. My parents, they both worked their asses off and gave us a very good quality of life. So we definitely didn't go, I don't want to, it wasn't like trust fund, or I didn't go, hey daddy, can I have, $1 million to do this or that? No, like, definitely self-taught, but I definitely respect the hell out of my parents for what they were able to provide for us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
definitely wasn't hard done by. I don't want to.
My life was real similar, just middle class family. With going into Aurora, you probably got paid out substantially on the stock bump, right?
It was tricky because as a reporting insider, we're always under blackout periods because it's always kind of on the assumption that something's going to be going on, and you do have working insider information, right? So like, before, if we're working on a deal, and it made sense, it totally made sense. If I knew that there was like a merger or acquisition coming up, they're like, okay, we're on blackout. Like, until this deal's done, you can't sell stock because you have insider information, right? So the legal team was always very, very cautious, and then we'd get like a window where everything was done. I didn't have any knowledge of anything that was wrong to trade on the stock or anything like that. And oftentimes it might be like at a bit of a dip, but. Yes, I was good.
You made money.
I was good.
Okay. You made more money than you're used to making.
And actually, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. One of the best things I ever did, and I don't know where the hell this came from, but I remember hustling hard, doing concrete, growing a bit on the side, and providing for my young family, and we were doing okay, but it was definitely month to month. Like, me and my wife, I never had to fight about cash or paying the bills or anything like that, but I knew that I wanted a bit more. I just wanted a little bit more stability, and not even so much like stuff, but I just wanted a little bit more stability. That's it.
Security.
Security, absolutely. And all of a sudden when it became clear, I was like, holy shit, this is going somewhere. And this is before we even started the talks about going public. I just looked at it. I'm like, man, that's 1,000 lights. I get 20% of 1,000 light grow. If we sell at this much per gram year after year, like by 5 years out, I was like, whew, like, this is, wow. Like, this is it. This is my break. This is my big opportunity. And I'm so glad that I sat down with my wife and I'm like, because one of the things that I didn't understand are the people, one of the guys in particular who invested and was key in the startup and running the company, is I couldn't wrap my head around his motivation. I remember asking him, we're staying up all night, having some drinks one night. And I'm like,
But he's already wealthy.
I'm like, why are you doing this? You know what I mean? Because I asked him, like, what do you, between me and you, I'm not going to say anything, but like, what are you worth? And he told me a number. I'm like, what the fuck are you, like, why are you doing this? Like, you're nuts. You know what I mean? Like, you're that much older than me, like I know if I was sitting with that much money, I would not be doing this. I would not, and his response to me was, I need to win. And I never really understood that. I'm like, what does that look like to you? And I realized, I'm like, I don't think you realize what winning looks like unless you really define it. I mean, like in sports, it's pretty clear. You know what I mean? Like in football, you win the Super Bowl if you score more points than the team. That's it. It's not really up for debate, right? I mean, maybe the reffing sucks, but whatever. Point I'm trying to make is if you don't clearly define what winning means to you, how do you know if you've won? Right?
Yeah, there's like no ending to winning.
No, because I look at that, like, and when I was sitting down, kind of thinking this through, trying to wrap my head around it, if I went back even a year in the past, if time travel was a thing, any time I go back, my past self, if I explained where I'm at, would be like, what? Like, are you serious? That's where we're at? Like, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, you're always trending. I mean, there's some ups and downs along the way, but for the most part, you're trending in the right direction. So what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to get caught up in that more and more and more. And I didn't want to lose sight of what we achieved, like what I've achieved. So I remember like sitting down, having a real conversation with my wife, being like, what do we want? And what is that? Let's put a number to it so that if we hit it, like we're good. I'm not saying we cash out and retire and we never work another day in our lives, but like more for, just perspective, you know what I mean? To not lose sight of that. Like, what does that look like? And we're like, well, this would be nice. That'd be nice. And okay, so that number is this number. So we agree. If we hit this, we're good. And it seemed so absurd at the time because we're like, well, yeah, we'd be good. Like, of course we'd be good. And it wasn't anything outrageous. It was just so much more than what we had at the time. Well, then we hit it. And it was kind of like, oh my God. But we didn't, it almost didn't have that effect. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like this big, like, let's pop out some champagne and celebrate.
No, it never is.
No. Yeah. So and I'm glad I did that because I realized I'm like, that's not for me. That's not the motivation. That's not what it's about.
Yeah. That's because it's not what drives you.
No,
you're not financially
and I'm
motivated.
so glad that I did that and I would really encourage anyone to start out, especially when they've got, success motivating them, like set a goalpost, like pick a milestone. And so just as a little bit of like, for a moment of reflection and just to kind of like contemplate and take in where you're at, be like, because that for me was really good because I realized I'm like, that's not what it's all about for me. And I learned really quickly that like nice things are nice to have, but like I was actually getting, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I was getting caught up in the almost the obsession of buying the thing. But once I had the thing, it didn't really mean much to me at all. Like it didn't really mean, I was kind of like, oh, cool. Yeah, there's that thing. But I was getting caught up in like the obsessing of like,
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's not good.
So coming from nothing and having money, right? What are the smartest things you did and what's the biggest mistakes you made?
Smartest thing I did was getting some solid life insurance set up. Just knowing that no matter what, as the market goes up, the market goes down, I could make really poor decisions. I just want to make sure that no matter what, like my biggest responsibility is to my family. My immediate family, my wife and kids, like they count on me. I started out and like basically put my hand up and said, I'll be a provider. I'll take care of you. My wife had a choice in the matter. My kids didn't. They didn't have any ability to consent to this. So you know what I mean? They're along for the ride whether they like it or not. So that responsibility and obligation was never lost on me. And the peace of mind that gave me, knowing that I was able to get, and like not just term policy, but if you ever look into whole life policies, they're expensive, but they're a great investment tool. They're a great tool to have. And once I got that set up, for me, and this might not be the same for everyone, but for me, the weight that was lifted off my shoulders and the peace of mind, just knowing that at any given moment, if something happens to me, they're good. like I felt like I did my job, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's the context I look at things. So that was for me the best, and some good estate planning, having a good will set up. And again, I realize this might be a bit less in terms of like context of business and more kind of like personal and family life. But those were by far the things that coming into some money allowed me to do, and that were by far the best decisions I've ever made, to give me the best quality of life I have with the best peace of mind. Just knowing that, like, because I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's inevitable. We're all we're all dying at some point. So I just want to make sure when that time comes, they're good. And like again, it's almost like it's just such a freeing, liberating feeling where, yeah.
Yeah, that your family's taken care of.
And the worst decision I've made, there was a lot, but there was a lot for sure. Okay, two. One was when my buddy was like, "Hey man, Bitcoin's at $4,000." I'm like, "That's insane. It's gonna drop back down to like, a few $100. Like I don't understand. That's crazy." And then taking a sizable amount of money and investing it in this stupid documentary that
You invested money into a documentary?
Yeah.
What was the documentary about?
Out of the love and respect for the subject matter, because he's a great guy, and also the chance that maybe it's going to do well. I don't want to shit talk it too bad, but it just hasn't turned. It was bad timing is really what it came down to. It was like wrapping up right around the pandemic, so there was no film fest like screenings. It didn't have a chance to go anywhere, and it did have a lot of potential. So a lot of it was circumstantial, and you never know. There's still a chance. So again, I don't want to talk poor about the guy who was on, because he's a pretty awesome guy. So we'll leave that one alone. But if I had taken that same amount of money and bought Bitcoin, again, it's one of those few shoulda, coulda, woulda, because the conversation came up on the same day. Like literally, it was the same day. Like I was at the gym, my trainer was telling me about Bitcoin going up to $4,000. I was like, "That's insane." Left and met the guy in the gym parking lot who's like, "All right, so here's the opportunity." I'm like, "Yeah,
so
I'm
it
in."
just correlates.
I'm in.
It correlates right
for me,
there.
I had a decision to take a sizable amount of money, and I was like, "That's stupid. This makes sense." And I don't lose sleep over stuff like that, but it's still, the irony's not lost on me.
What'd you learn from that, investing into a business? Because that's really what it is. You're invested into, you're taking cash that you made that you've never had before, giving it to somebody else for a project, which is a business or whatever. Kind of same concept, right? I know it's a documentary, but it's still, you're giving your cash to somebody else and saying, "Hey, go make money with my money," right?
You can't be tied. For me, I think the biggest lesson was you can't be tied to the outcome. And what I mean by that is, it's like, I don't gamble as much as I used to, but when I was younger, I used to like playing cards and stuff. But I always looked at it as that's entertainment. How much am I willing to spend to be entertained tonight? It was never like, okay, I feel it. Today's my day. I'm going to make some money. No. I'm going in there to have fun. Investing in other businesses are the same way, because you have no control. You know what I mean? And you win some, you lose some. So, and the reason I bring up that parallel is some people that are gamblers, you only hear about, "Oh, I went in and, I won $1,000 or I won 10 grand in the Super Bowl or whatever," but they never tell you about the losses. And at the end of the day, most people probably break even. You know what I mean? You win some, you lose some. I can't lose sleep. And again, it's just money. It's not even a real thing. As much as it can create tangible things, it's not real. It's a social construct that we agree upon, right? If we don't agree to the value of something, it means nothing.
Yeah.
We only agree that $1 is $1 because we agree that it is.
Yeah.
Right. But I can't lose sleep over the ones that I lost on, because the ones that I really did well on, there's some events in me that I did phenomenal on. But like that comes and goes, and so I just see some people where they can't let go of the loss. You know what I mean? They just can't let it go, and they get bitter. And what I've learned about money, currency, it's actually a really important lesson I learned when I was like 18, backpacking through Australia, and this crazy old backpacker hippie guy explained to me money's not real. And because I couldn't understand how he just like was so free to get money and then let it go. Like, he'd look at me and be like, what are you doing for dinner? I'm like, "Oh, nothing. I gotta stretch my cash, whatever." And he's like, "Oh, here, go grab a burger," or something like that. He was so free, and he had so little. And he explained to me that money is currency, and currency, the word, comes from current. I don't know if this is actually true or not. This is what he told me. And it made sense. You think currency, current, and it's a flow, and it's meant to move. And the more that you interrupt that flow, the less the flow keeps moving. So everyone expects it to just come to them. You know what I mean? Everyone just wants to like just be sitting there and having that stream of cash, of currency just wash all over them. But when it comes time to let it go, people are kind of like, they try to dam it off. They try to like stop that flow and keep it. But it, you know, it's hard to do that. Water wants to keep moving. Currency wants to keep moving. So what I've learned is you got to let it go as easy as you let it come in, right? And if you can really embrace that, and that means paying your taxes, that means taking a loss on investment, that means, you know, some stupid bill that you didn't see coming, you know what I mean, a repair on your vehicle or whatever that you're kind of like, maybe you don't agree with because it should be covered under warranty, but they're saying it's not. You just got to do it. Just let it go. I'm not just saying throw it away. You know what I mean? Like be smart with your decision, but like when it's clear that you need to let go of it, let go of it. And don't even worry about it. Because, you know, like instead of like lamenting and like mourning that loss.
Especially on bad investments, or if you just made a bad mistake, you can't dwell on it because it's going to hold you down, hold you back.
Yeah.
You know, for sure.
And they're good lessons. Like, you know, you're going to learn them no matter what. A lot of people learn a great deal from going to university and getting degrees. But there's a cost associated to that. You know, there's money that you have to spend to get that, and time, and probably some heartache and whatnot, right? My lessons were learned not in a school, but I mean, the world is a classroom, and if you're open to it, you're learning every day. And I learned some really expensive mistakes. Not mistakes. I learned some really expensive lessons, and I'm grateful for them.
Do you focus on, did you invest any of that capital into something that produces consistent cash flow with low labor at all? Like real estate or?
You know, and I wish I would have. Some of the people that were kind of like mentors to me at the time, remember, because that made sense to me. Coming from middle class, real estate made sense. And I was talked out of it basically. And I wish I would
talked out of it.
I wish I would have done a better job. So me and you have talked about commercial real estate in the past.
Yeah.
I wasn't really focusing on commercial. I was thinking more residential, because that was something, again, for me being, you know, someone in the trades as a concrete guy, you know, renovation guy, that made sense to me. Like a single family detached house was something I could wrap my head around. It was in the realm of possibility in terms of like the actual capital outlay. I understand the maintenance. I understood how to rent it, you know, like I could wrap my head around that. And yeah, when I brought that up, and I was going to actually buy like a new house that was being built, and I remember one of the guys like I went to, I'm like, what do you think? And he's like, no. So he broke it down. He's like, you know, you got your cost of ownership, you got this, you got the headache. What happens if the renters, you know, bail on you, if they trash the place, you got this, you got that, you know, if it goes up this much percentage, at best, you know, it's all this time and energy for 8% return over a year. And I was like, oh.
What was his advice to do with capital? Markets.
Yeah. Display the markets. And again, I mean,
when you're playing the markets, like when you're an everyday guy like you and me running a business with a family, that's not your job, right? Nope. Your job's not a stockbroker, right? Unless you're just going to throw it in the S&P 500, like playing the markets doesn't seem like the best idea.
But now that you bring that up, it's funny. I just read an article from Warren Buffett, and that was his advice to the middle class. Buy yourself 20 years. If you got 20 years, you know, the best, what was it? The best time to plant a tree was yesterday or 20 years ago, but you know, still start today. And yeah, if you've got
just
that
buy the S&P 500
year after year after year, and all of a sudden
it beats a lot of managers.
There are so many, and you can go back to like, what is it? The 1800s. It's been around for a long time. And you can see the historical like performance. Again, it's not going to make you rich overnight. I think that's actually one of the issues I find is when you talk to people, like people almost turn their nose up at a 10% return, you know?
I mean, I'm cool with 7, 6.
I know, but a lot of people are thinking that because they hear about stuff and it's in the media and they hear about, you know, different crypto and this and that, where if you just put money in, it's like, you're not even doubling it. You know what I mean? Sometimes people want to they want a 10 time, they want 100 time, they want to like put $1,000 and walk away with $1 million.
Yeah, it's just not practical.
No, but looking at zooming out over say a 20-year, that's actually makes a lot more sense. You know what I mean? Especially if you've got some time to play with. Yeah, it would have been better to do it when you're 20, but there's nothing wrong with doing it when you're 40.
Yeah, I like real estate because cash flow. You know, I think real estate's a store of value. It's store of wealth, right? You have a tangible asset, produces cash flow, as long as it's the right real estate. Right? You can definitely buy the wrong real estate. and it produces income, right? And you know that income's coming in every month as long as you have a good lease, good underlying asset, in a good location, with a good tenant that has good financials. It's pretty simple, pretty basic, right? And with residential versus industrial or commercial, residential averages a 4.5% cap rate, right?
Okay.
Capitalization rate. So, and industrial, you're looking, 6.5, 7% on commercial and industrial, and also try kicking out a family that's living in a house, or try kicking out a business out of a building. It's a lot easier to kick a business out of a building than it is a family out of the house. If, for some reason, the rent's not being paid and you're left with the expenses of that asset, and they're not, paying their way. Real estate, it's a great store of value, and it doesn't always go up, right? But if it's producing cash flow, does it have to? Doesn't have to go up.
And how often does it go down?
I mean, it went down in 2008 for sure. I mean,
did that only because I haven't looked into it too much. But what was it? How long did it take to rebound?
Oh, pretty quickly, a few years. About 2010, 11, it was coming back pretty heavily. But what's the 3 years? But the thing is, if you're getting cash flow and your management and time is not that significant for that cash flow, I mean, and there's a lot less risk, right, in real estate. Residential, I don't think, to each his own. Maybe somebody's really successful with residential, making a 4.5% cap rate. Maybe they, do Airbnbs, and you can definitely get a larger cap rate off Airbnbs, but that's time, energy, and risk. You're taking more risk, more time, more energy. So I think the least amount of risk, the highest cap rate for, is, in my opinion, commercial. Yeah.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Next time, just hit me up.
There you go.
Yeah, mentorship's big. I think I have a really good mentor in real estate, and I think it's really important to pick the right mentor, and it could be in anything. Ivan's my mentor in business. Ivan guides me in decisions and how to handle certain situations and problems. And then I've got my other buddy that mentors me in real estate. So I think, finding a good mentors, or, for anybody in business, is really important. And I think when you're mentoring people as well, I think you learn more. Because you're getting that person that you're mentoring. Maybe I don't really mentor a lot of people, but if they ask me questions, I'll give advice. But when you're getting those questions asked, you might not know the answers to those questions, right? And it takes like, wow, I don't know that. Actually, I should look that up, right? So it kind of increases you as well. That mentorship, even if you're mentoring somebody else, I think it's really big.
Absolutely. I think because it puts you in a different headspace, and I think it focuses you just to shift your perspective a little bit, and just give a little bit of pause and reflection on when someone asks you a question, how are you responding? Sometimes it's good to, it's almost good to hear your own voice. You know what I mean?
It keeps you fresh as well. Like it keeps it consistent because somebody's learning from you. So you're always, staying consistent.
And then not only that, and I don't know if your experience has been like this as well, but very rarely do people ask a question and it's like, okay, cool, thanks. It's more like, well, what do you mean? So after that, like it forces you to have someone else, even like honestly, even this conversation, like, well, hey, what do you think about this? Like the back and forth, and, instead of just having it kind of one-sided.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Sometimes the conversation in your head is a little bit one-sided.
All right. Books that you would recommend. Do you listen to or read any books?
I do, yes.
What's some books that you would recommend to help people in business?
I can't remember the name or the author, but there was one Navy SEAL guy who wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. And I really enjoyed that because it was about how in crazy situations, like literally life or death, like how ultimately, like after the fact, when there's congressional hearings and this and that, you can point the finger all you want, right? But in that minute, like you have to own, like extreme ownership, right? And it was such extreme examples. It was like I never hoped to find myself in those type of situations at all, but it almost gave a really good perspective of if humans are capable of performing under those intense conditions, business should be a walk in the park. You know what I mean? Like our day to day, like you got time to think. There's no threat of loss of life. You know what I mean? There's no, yeah, you got people they got to take into consideration, but their lives are at stake. So I found that one to be pretty good. I'm trying to think, business wise.
Some people always ask me for advice and about investing or whatever. I think one of the most important books that I read when I was like 16 was Rich Dad Poor Dad. Have you read that one or listened to it?
I've listened to it. Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
It's funny.
It's so basic and so easy.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just when you said when I was about 16, because that was the time for sure.
When it became bigger, huh?
Yeah.
And I was just a kid. But what did you, if you can remember, what did you get from that book?
For me, because I would have read it. It wasn't an audiobook, and I read it when I was quite young. I think the biggest takeaway for me isn't any one point, just the fact that it even got me thinking in that regard about money and just about finances and just being a little bit more intentional, a little bit like conscious about that at that age, right?
Yep.
I think I might have even been a little bit younger. I think it might have been like more like a kind of like middle school age, not even high school. So it wasn't even on my radar yet. I wasn't managing my own finances or anything. I can't remember who told me about that.
I think my aunt told me about it and I got it and I listened to it. It was on CD. I think the biggest thing I got from that book is separating, it's really basic, assets and liabilities. Super basic, right? And another thing is, I'll go into it later, but assets and liabilities, right? Focus on increasing your asset column and reduce your liability column. I remember, I definitely made some mistakes and had to file for BK at like 22 years old. And I felt like such a loser, like just total loser. I was like, I'm such a loser. This is, just not happy with where I was at. And I opened up a hydroponic store. It was 500 square feet. And I lived in the back for 4 years. As soon as I filed BK, I was like, fresh start, like start over, opened a small hydroponic shop, lived in the back, drove just a 1990 Jeep Wrangler stick shift, couldn't open the door because I had to put my hand outside the door to open it from the outside. And I was so deathly afraid of failing that I would listen to the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, got really focused, totally almost eliminated my liability column and just 100% focused on my asset column, which is business, all these different business ventures that I was working on. I didn't have enough money to buy real estate. And I just lived in the back of a hydro shop and saved everything. Every penny I made, I would save it. I would eat, drive my Jeep and save my money. And that book was big on me getting out of that like situation I had been in at such a young age that I had learned so much that even 4 years later, I remember I had a lot of money in my bank account. Business was doing great. And I still drove the Jeep Wrangler. I was so scared of failing that I couldn't buy a car. Like I couldn't buy a new car because I was so deathly afraid of what happened when I was 22, even, at 26, I was just so scared.
And when you were 22, was it a matter of due to like overextending yourself?
Yeah. So, I started a pressure washing business where I was just working at nights, pressure washing gas stations and shopping malls. And I bought a truck and then I bought it on credit and then I bought a pressure washer on credit. And the business was making money, But then I invested into some different grows that I was doing and just got overextended. And I opened up a hookah bar, which, was expensive. So I had a hookah bar, I had a pressure washing business, and some grows. Just the debt piled up pretty quick. And I was making bad decisions too, because you're 20, 19, 20, 21, you're an idiot, at that. I mean, I'm definitely, you're not making the best decisions at those ages.
But I think that for me, there's nothing anyone could have ever told me. No book, no audiobook, nothing. I had to go through that on my own. I can't remember. I think I might have been 26, 27 when I went bankrupt. And yeah, similar story. Just all of a sudden the debts piled up. For me, it was tax debt. And I was like, well, this is stupid. Just got behind on things and just got to a point where you take a look at it and like, I can't get caught up.
Yeah, like you look at it, you're like, there's no way I can get out of this.
Yeah. And so those are important lessons. And yeah, I think for me, it helped to feel like a piece of shit and be like, yeah, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, I think that was the big change for me.
Mm-hmm.
Going through that difficult time and knowing and coming out of it and just feeling that way, just of dread and loser or whatever. You're just like, I'm never going to do that again. Like I'm never, and it, yeah, you need to get kicked in the ass sometimes.
So everything you're saying right now, I think is great advice. It's not sexy advice. And like, I'm almost wondering, how do you counter, and I got my thing for social media where I'm not really too big into it. But what I do see when I observe kind of, from the outside looking in, especially on things like Instagram, there's such a push for like style over substance. And just, there's almost this expectation of just having the stuff, and it seems like credit be damned, just, buy now, pay later. And like, I don't see, I'm not, and maybe there's a lot of great investing and information out there. But where I see it seems more just like, such a drive and such a desire and want for material things and a certain lifestyle and looking a certain way and living a certain way. And a lot of it doesn't seem, unless you are some crazy social media influencer who has, I don't even know how many millions of followers, like how do you maintain that lifestyle? Like it doesn't, like for us growing up, that wasn't even within the realm of possibility. There's very few people that were, late teens, early 20s that were living that kind of lifestyle. I mean, not to say they didn't exist, but they were. It was almost like exclusively like trust fund kids. You know what I mean? That were like, they were so far over there. But now it's like that sort of like level of wealth and excess is now almost portrayed as being normal, and that's what you should expect and what you deserve, like what you're entitled to.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for a lot of those individuals, but I'd imagine a lot of it's debt.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it goes back to like what makes you feel important, and driving a nice car or flashing cash around. I wear a Garmin wristwatch, so it doesn't give me the feeling of importance. I really just don't care. I remember being a kid looking at a guy in a nice car or this or that, or, with money, whatever. I was like, wow. But now I look at it and I'm like, it's kind of gross a little bit. It's kind of a bit of a turnoff, right? I think what gives me my feeling of importance is more of a balance between, family life and driving, like I said, success for other people and teams, whether it be our end users, our growers, or our team. That gives me a feeling of importance, is impacting other people's, success. I don't know if that makes sense.
Actually makes a lot of success. And it's actually, I never really thought of it like that, but I think there's a lot of businesses you could have and own and operate where the team is set up for continued success. But you're actually able to take one step further and like you say, inspire and encourage success of your customers.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of people, they're just their customers. They're just a consumer.
I don't look at it that way.
They're just buying a thing, right?
Yeah.
eating a Big Mac is not setting people up for success.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're just consuming.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with a Big Mac once in a while, but you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whereas, so that's actually really interesting that yours, it's not just top down within your organization. It continues once your product leaves the doors.
100%. And that's why we do so much content on guidance, irrigation strategy, product knowledge. You know, it was big when I had a hydroponic store. It wasn't about the money, right? It was about just building something from nothing. The team, having the shop. It was like the barber shop. The hydroponic shop's the barber shop, right? Everybody comes, you're building relationships with the community. But guys would put things on the counter and stack it up. And I'd be like, hey, you don't need that. Like, if you did this, you'd do better. You don't need all this stuff, right? You'll be just successful with this. You're actually buying two of the same products right here. This is the same thing.
You don't need to go to the grandmaster level.
Yeah, the grandmaster level. So, and that's exactly what we did with Athena, right?
You strip it all out.
I strip it all out. But I was doing that with the hydroponic shop, right? And I was like, look, this is really what you need to be successful. It's on a very small level, but Athena was on a very big level. And just transparent and told the truth about what we're finding, not trying to sell another product just to make money, right? And we still have that really strong culture. There's things we're running side by sides in the R&D right now of multiple different products and things that are not out on the market right now. And some of them are going really well and some of them aren't. And the ones that aren't, we won't release, and the ones that are, we'll keep testing and seeing if we're willing to put the Athena name on it, because it's big. I mean, I think when you have a brand and you're putting your name on it, like, that product's got to be vetted, like really vetted, because the community's trusting everything that you're putting out. So it's really big for us to just take our time on research and development. There's products that we have right now that I would love to release, but they still need to be vetted more. Like, they still need more time because we got to look at all the different variables. So yeah, so it's pretty interesting.
And is that just to make sure that, like, just to make sure it's totally fine tuned, it's going to meet your strict requirements, like just.
Yeah, I think, when you're dealing with different products and irrigation lines, you really got to pay attention to what it's going to do inside that irrigation line. So a lot of it's like, yeah, we're seeing this really great results. How do we make it cleaner to where they can run it in continuous, get the same effect, get the same, benefit, but not cause, a complete breakdown of their irrigation system over time, right? And that's a lot of what we're doing right now. Is making sure that if we're going to put a product out there, it can be run at scale. It can be run in irrigation systems, see the benefit, but not cause all the problems.
Yeah, especially on scale, because if you're replacing 100 emitters, it's not the end of the world.
No.
1,000's not great. 100,000, people are going to take issue with that.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it was good.
This was a good switch up.
Yeah, it was fun for sure.
Yeah, about business.
Absolutely. Any other really key points, takeaways, like any big piece of advice you want to put out there?
What about for you?
I think we did a good job of touching upon all of it, and I think just do your best to pause. Yes, there's always How do you manage that sense of urgency? Because with business, a lot of times you can feel like you're always behind the 8 ball. And as much as you want to try to get ahead of things, you're never as ahead or on top of things as you'd like to be. So there's that sense of urgency. But yet I've been finding on a personal and professional level such growth and such benefit to just trying to pause, slow down, reflect. The magic happens when something happens in a conversation with someone, in a relationship, in a grow room, in a boardroom. It doesn't matter. When something comes up based on our past experiences, our belief systems, our ego, there's this inkling to react. But if you can just pause, and trust me, no one ever thinks you're stupid for not saying anything for half a second, right? There's nothing wrong with just literally sitting there and pausing and then choosing how to respond. If you can choose to respond rather than react, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of success.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, take your time with interactions, but in business, slowing down is key because you can make a quick decision that's going to affect you for years, 5, 10 years on one decision that you're going to make. And so spending a few weeks to make that decision, it's not that big of a deal, and being conscious of your emotions and understanding how you're feeling about doing a business or going into a partnership. I think that's one big thing we should talk about, partnerships. But, you're going to make this decision and move forward with it. You could be living with this decision, positive or negative, for the next 5 to 10 years on a business and especially on a partnership. I see a lot of people get into partnerships really quickly, and it's like, oh, hey, I'm just going to partner up with this guy and we're going to do this. You have to look at getting into business with somebody the same way as you getting married to somebody. It's the exact same thing. You're getting married to somebody. Do you want to be married to this person? Right? Even if you're an investor, right? Because you're buying equity, you're becoming partners. Like, can you see yourself being married to this person for the next 10 plus years? And with that comes a lot of due diligence and a lot of time of, hey, you could be friends with somebody, but you don't really know who people are until you do business with them.
And more importantly to that, when things don't go well in business.
100%.
It's really easy to start out, establish, maintain a friendship. And when things are smooth sailing and whatnot, but it's when things start getting tough. Yeah, friendship means little when it's convenient.
Yeah, 100%. So advice on that, I would just take time with partnerships and try to do business with people before you go into business with them. That's a big one.
And keep your eyes and ears open and really pay attention. And even if it's not necessarily a partnership, like, someone like you're like going into a business venture with, but even people you're working with, suppliers, vendors, distributors, really be honest. And more so whether you just like the person or not, you know what I mean? Are they fun to hang out with? Or, but like, how do they conduct themselves? Do they operate with integrity? Are they honest? And so the ones that are good, they really pay note and like really make sure that they're treated as such. And you know what? Don't hang on to the ones that don't. If they're not operating with integrity, if they're not doing what they say they're going to, if they're not reliable, if they're not trustworthy, you don't have time for them.
Also look at their life and how old their friendships are. That's a big one. I always try to pay attention when I'm dealing with people. If they got a lot of new friends, that's concerning. If they got a lot of old friends, 10, 20-year-old friends, that says a lot about somebody, how old their friends are. That's a big one.
And if they have no friends, that's even more telling.
That's even worse. Yeah, if they have no friends. Yeah. Another big one, conflict. I see this like culture on Instagram where people get in conflict and it's unnecessary. Conflict can be avoided. And I think a lot of it stems from egos, right? You've got to keep your ego in check. And just because somebody got over on you or this situation happens, just take it on the chin and walk away. Like there's no reason to get in some kind of conflict over a certain situation and make it much more worse than it has to be. Like just take it and go on. Just remember that you're responsible for that. Like take responsibility for putting yourself in the situation to let that happen. And that goes back to like what I was saying, when you're responsible for everything, it makes life a lot easier, in my opinion, because you're responsible for that conflict. Whether somebody did something to you or not, you put yourself in that situation to let that happen to you.
Or even more so to that, even if you necessarily didn't put yourself into that situation, but you're still always responsible at how you choose to respond to that.
100%.
That's really the only thing we have any control over, is how we choose to respond, right?
Yeah.
We only have control over ourselves. So conflict, I think all conflict can be resolved until there's a breakdown in communication.
100%.
So, and that's both sides, and which is tricky because, again, you can only be responsible for your end of things, right? So if there's the willingness and an ability to speak and hear the other person and go back and forth, but it's when it shuts down and you're just not willing to hear it, you know what I mean? For whatever reason, like, no, absolutely not. We're not doing that. You know, I can't move forward with that. I can't accept that. You're being unreasonable. Click. Well, then that's it. There's no ability to resolve that conflict. But, and also I think, you know, going back to paying attention to, you know, people and their friends and whatnot, pay attention to when things do come up, you know, even little things, you know, and that's what I've noticed with people that I'm really good with working at. Sometimes we've had to have some really difficult conversations, but there's always that respect. I've always noticed that little bit of a pause. We're like, okay, no, I hear you. Okay, that was unexpected. I didn't see that coming. Okay. You know, and pause, just be like, hey, can we revisit this tomorrow or next week, whatever? I need to wrap my head around this. I didn't anticipate that coming up. And actually, quite frankly, I don't think it's fair, but let me get back to you. You know, and then there's that back and forth. And usually, even when you have to agree to disagree, and I feel like we almost lost that, where people say, like, they say it as like you're being respectful, but it's like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, well, I guess we have to agree, disagree. You can actually agree to disagree and do it super amicably and super respectfully, where it's like, okay, you know what? I actually don't agree with you on this, but I agree it's the best path forward.
Yeah, 100%.
I would like to do this differently, and I'd actually like to go in this other direction. But it's about compromise. Sometimes it's about not always getting your way and stomping your feet and having a little tantrum, right? So
yeah, communication's massive. You've got to have good communication.
When I look back at anything that's really fallen apart, you know, and not been able to be salvageable, it's due to a breakdown of communication.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what happened. Communication stopped.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I hope this was a really dope podcast.
Yeah, that was fun.
I hope people got a lot out of it. You know, it's nice to just talk genuine and have humility and just put it all out there. And yeah, hope the community, you know, learns something from it.
Absolutely. No, that was great. I think we touched upon a lot of different things, and I think, and yeah, if someone, because I don't know if it's the same thing as you, there's never been any one thing I've read or heard or podcast, but you take bits and pieces, and
it sticks with you.
If there's even just, you know, a couple little things along the way where, like, you know, it makes sense and resonate, take it, run with it, make it your own, and embody it, and do well with it.
Cool, man. Thanks for making the flight out.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. All right.